Partisan battle lines drawn in the U.S. Senate as confirmation hearings for Judge Amy Coney Barrett kick off. Republicans focusing on the qualifications of President Trump's conservative nominee for the Supreme Court, and Democrats portraying her as a threat to health care. A second coronavirus wave slams France, filling up intensive care units with the highest number of COVID-19 patients since May. Authorities now saying they won't rule out local lockdowns. And as Ghanaian President Alpha Condé gears up to seek a controversial third term in elections on Sunday, France 24 brings you its first episode in a series looking back at his decade in power. Hi, and thanks for joining us here in the France 24 newsroom. I'm Claire Rush. But first, to the U.S. 3 weeks away from the presidential election, a tense political battle is now playing out in the Senate over the confirmation of Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. As 4 days of fast-tracked hearings kicked off on Monday, Democrats and Republicans sparred over President Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court. If Barrett is confirmed to the lifetime appointment, it would cement a 6-3 conservative majority on the court, potentially shifting its ideological leanings for decades to come. Here's an excerpt of Barrett's opening statement.
Courts have a vital responsibility to the rule of law, which is critical to a free society. But courts are not designed to solve every problem or right every wrong in our public life. The policy decisions and value judgments of government must be made by the political branches, elected by and accountable to the people. The public should not expect courts to do so, and courts should not try. That is the approach that I have strived to follow as a judge on the Seventh Circuit. When I write an opinion resolving a case, I read every word from the perspective of the losing party. I ask myself how I would view the decision if one of my children was the party that I was ruling against. Even though I would not like the result, would I understand that the decision was fairly reasoned and grounded in law? That is the standard that I set for myself in every case, and it is the standard that I will follow so long as I am a judge on any court.
Now, during Monday's hearing, Democrats sought to portray Judge Amy Coney Barrett as a direct threat to the Affordable Care Act, or ACA, the signature domestic policy achievement of former President Barack Obama that expanded health care coverage for millions of Americans. Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris was one of the senators that touched on the ACA. Have a listen.
This administration, with the support of Senate Republicans, will be in front of the Supreme Court on November 10th to argue that the entire Affordable Care Act should be struck down. That's in 29 days that'll happen. And that's a big reason why Senate Republicans are rushing this process. They are trying to get a justice onto the court in time to ensure they can strip away the protections of the Affordable Care Act. And if they succeed, it will result in millions of people losing access to health care at the worst possible time, in the middle of a pandemic.
Now, those Supreme Court confirmation hearings taking place against the backdrop of the presidential election. With just 3 weeks to go until Election Day, Donald Trump has now returned to the campaign trail, eager to showcase his health just a week after being released from the hospital for COVID-19. The U.S. president holding his first rally since contracting the virus in Florida. Here's what he told supporters in that battleground state.
But it's great to be back in my home state, Florida, to make my official return to the campaign trail. I am so energized by your prayers and humbled by your support. We've had such incredible support. And here we are. Here we are. We've made tremendous progress. If you look at what we're doing with therapeutics and, frankly, cures, we've made tremendous progress. And I said to my people, we are going to take whatever the hell they gave me and we're going to distribute it around to hospitals and everyone's going to have the same damn thing.
Now, meanwhile, Donald Trump's Democratic challenger, Joe Biden, was also on the campaign trail. On Monday, the Democrat made 2 stops in Ohio. The key battleground state was once considered out of reach for Biden after Trump's wide margin of victory there 4 years ago, but opinion polls are now suggesting a competitive race there. While in Ohio, Biden touted an economic message while speaking to auto workers in Toledo and also called for bipartisanship at an event in Cincinnati. Here's a clip of that speech in Cincinnati.
We need to revive the spirit of bipartisanship in this country. I know that sounds bizarre in light of where we are. The spirit of being able to work with one another. When I say that, and I said that from the time I announced, I was told that maybe that was the way things used to work, Joe. You got a lot done before, Joe, but you can't do that anymore. Well, I'm here to tell you and say we can. There will be no blue states and red states with me. It's one America. I'll work with Democrats and Republicans. I'll work as hard for those who vote against me as those who voted for me.
Moving on, here in France, authorities are grappling with the surge in new coronavirus infections. Over the weekend, more than 40,000 new cases were reported. The Prime Minister no longer ruling out local lockdowns to limit the spread, as Delano de Souza reports.
As France faces a strong second wave of coronavirus infections, Prime Minister Jean Castex is ruling nothing out. On Monday, he was asked if regional lockdowns could be enforced.
Nothing can be excluded. Nothing can be excluded when we look at the situation in our hospitals. A general nationwide lockdown needs to be avoided. It's possible if we all make an effort.
Since the nationwide lockdown in May, authorities in France have been reminding citizens that they will learn to live with the virus. At the end of summer, many businesses required employees to return to the workplace with new sanitary protocols in place. Schools also reopened across the country, making it possible for parents in France to get back to work.
My objective is that economic activity continues. French businesses continue to work. You're working, I'm working, a majority are working, barring a few sectors. We must continue.
With the rise in coronavirus infections, 9 French cities, including the capital Paris, have been placed on the highest alert level. Restrictive measures have since gone into effect, including the closure of gyms and bars. It remains unclear if they are sufficient enough to curb the rate of infection for now.
While scientists have found evidence that COVID-19 can be spread by airborne particles, they've also been trying to figure out how long the virus can survive on surfaces like plastic, steel, and glass. A study from Australia has now concluded that it can remain infectious on smooth surfaces for longer than was originally thought. France 24's Julie Seeger explains.
Australia's National Science Agency says it has found that the virus responsible for COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, can remain infectious for about 28 days on smooth surfaces. So that includes glass, it also includes steel and paper polymers. So typically it means cell phone screens and even money. And that's true only under certain lab conditions. So at about 20 degrees Celsius, which is about room temperature, and no light. And the hotter the environment, the less likely the virus will actually survive. That said, it's much more than what other studies had concluded back in March, saying that SARS-CoV-2 could survive about 2 to 3 days on banknotes and glass, about 6 days on plastic, and 24 hours on cardboard. And the reason why these results vary from one study to the other is because there are very specific lab conditions. So specific temperatures, humidity rates, but also specific levels of virus. So it's important to have that information, and at the same time, it doesn't tell you much. What's important is that people who are infected with COVID-19 are much more contagious than any other surface. COVID-19 is mainly transmitted when people cough, talk, or sneeze.
France 24's Julia Seeger. In other coronavirus news, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced a new alert system for England, medium, high, and very high. This, as the National Health Service comes under further strain. Hospitals are treating more COVID-19 patients now than when the country entered lockdown in March. Russia is urging Armenia and Azerbaijan to start observing a ceasefire to end hostilities in the separatist territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. Moscow brokered the ceasefire on Saturday, but it was immediately challenged by mutual claims of violations. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met with his Armenian counterpart on Monday for further talks. Here's Lavrov speaking earlier.
Our joint night vigils that ended with the approval of a very important document were not in vain. Our efforts were not wasted, and we'll be able to resolve the issue on the ground very soon. The development of verification mechanisms shouldn't be delayed. The work is underway on this now. The Russian Federation is participating in it. The co-chairs are providing all possible assistance.
Protests against Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko continue. Thousands of pensioners taking to the streets of the capital, Minsk, on Monday, just one day after more than 700 people were detained, the harshest crackdown on demonstrators in weeks. This as the Interior Ministry announced police are now authorized to use lethal force. And finally, millions of Ghanaians will head to the polls on Sunday in an election dominated by the economy and the coronavirus pandemic. It's a chance for voters to deliver their verdict on President Alpha Conde's decade in office. Earlier this year, a referendum saw a change in the country's constitution, which he says allows him to run again. This report from France 24's Nicolas Germain.
In 2010, Alpha Conde became Guinea's first democratically elected president. Between independence in 1958 and 2010, the country was ruled by authoritarian regimes. Conde was re-elected in 2015. This analyst says the political situation is not perfect, but much better than under previous presidents.
L'arrivée d'Alpha Condé a constitué un espoir du point de vue de la façon dont il est arrivé au pouvoir, c'est-à-dire par la voie des urnes. Cela a permis notamment la contradiction du point de vue de l'action politique, c'est-à-dire qu'on a eu une opposition qui est capable de remettre en cause et de commenter les actions du gouvernement.
Amnesty International says that under Conde, security forces have cracked down on the opposition, especially during demonstrations. In March, the constitution was changed following a referendum. Presidents can do 2 terms maximum. But Conde says a new constitution means this rule starts now and therefore he can run again. His supporters stress that the economy grew by nearly 6% last year. This researcher analyses Conde's economic policies.
Dans les infrastructures énergétiques, il y a eu des acquis. Il y a eu beaucoup d'investissements. Il y a eu une augmentation des investissements dans le secteur minier, dans le secteur hôtelier. Malheureusement, pour le cas spécifique du secteur minier, c'est un secteur non pourvoyeur d'emplois parce qu'il représente à peu près 5% des emplois en Guinée.
Selou Dalin Diallo is Conde's main rival. He says the president has failed to eradicate poverty and corruption. Voters will decide between the 2 main candidates on October the 18th.
You're watching France 24. Up next, the debate with Tom Burgess-Watson.